Alright, hey guys, welcome back to another Super Smash Ultimate video, and today's gonna be a tier list video, another one, but it's gonna have a more specific topic. For today, we're gonna be ranking all the comeback mechanics in Smash Ultimate. Now, when it comes to comeback mechanics, semantics for what defines a comeback mechanic is usually left up from, it comes down to a person-to-person basis. Some people might consider X character to have a comeback mechanic, others might not. Some might be interpreted as a comeback mechanic, but it can also be misconstrued as a win more mechanic, so it really differs, but I think the ones that I'm going to be choosing for this video should be pretty generally agreed upon as having some semblance of a comeback factor to it. The reason I want to make this into a tier list instead of making a dedicated discussion on it is because Mockrock already made a video on it, which kind of sums up everything I wanted to say if I wanted to make it a video essay or discussion format. So I'll leave a link to the video in the description below. I recommend you check it out. So instead, what I want to do is rank what I think is better than the others, because I think that's one thing that Mockrock didn't go into too much in depth, is that he talked about comeback mechanics as a design format and I guess as a kind of a vehicle to drive a character's power budget in a certain direction. He didn't really go into every single comeback mechanic individually, he kind of went over it just more as a overall, how does it impact the competitive integrity of a character. So that's what we're going to do for today. The characters I have are going to be Cloud, Kazuya, Sephiroth, Terry, Joker, Wario, Lucario, and Little Mac. I believe that's everyone. Let me just double check. I already made the tier list. I just did it in I took a screenshot of it, so that's what I'm going to be referring to. I guess we'll open up with probably, let's do Joker first. So I should clarify that similarly to how Mockrock does on his second channel, when I rank a comeback mechanic or something in D tier, I'm not referring to it as a terribly designed ability. It's just that in reference to the other comeback mechanics or the other things I'm going to be listing, it will be the worst one of its kind. So Joker I'm going to put in B tier. Now I've mentioned how Arsene, especially in my Why No One Plays Joker video, how Arsene is for the most part a comeback mechanic in concept, but more of a win more mechanic on paper. Reason being, you acquire it by taking damage, right? After Joker sustains about, I think 60% damage or less or more, depending on if he has a stock leader deficit, then that's when he activates Arsene. And what Arsene does is amplify the power and effectiveness of all of his existing moves, sometimes adding a few new properties to it, particularly his specials, like for his side B, it gets an actual explosion radius to it, or for gun, he shoots multiple bullets instead of just one, and he also gets a counter. But for his normals, they mostly just get more damage, a little bit more hitbox coverage depending on what move it is. For example, back air usually is an under upper scoop, whereas if it has Arsene, then it's just a full coverage even from above. So it enhances Joker's abilities more than compensates for what he's lacking. And that's why I consider it a win more mechanic, because if you're already getting your ass destroyed as Joker at base, Arsene isn't going to do too much to save you. In fact, it might do more harm than good, because what happens, especially for people who are just picking up Joker, is that when Arsene comes out, everyone has this mentality of, oh, I need to make the most of it, and the longer that's spent without using it means that it's being wasted, right? If your opponent camps you out, then you lose Arsene, which might pressure people into being more aggressive than they can afford to be on Joker, and therefore putting themselves even further behind. One could argue that that's a better way to design comeback mechanics, is to make it so that the player has to be prudent, or the player has to be aware of how to actually make use of it the most. And others might say that comeback mechanics are designed to, no matter how good or bad you are, that is what you can do to get back into the game. Depending on which school of thought you subscribe to, Joker's comeback mechanics are either the best or the worst. But I think that when it comes to comeback mechanics, it should do something to elevate a character's range of options. That, in my opinion, is what defines a comeback mechanic. If what you had before is not working, then maybe what you have after you activate said mechanic, it should be enough to make up whatever deficit you're going for. And in Joker's case, it doesn't really do that. It just makes his already existing kit do more, if you can land it, which I'll actually be talking about, I guess, with another comeback mechanic. Let's say, or Terry. So Terry, his go button, I think, is quite interesting because, for one, it has a similar activation clause to Joker where he has to sustain a certain amount of damage. In this case, it is at 100% and he sustains it indefinitely until he loses a stock. Now, in the case of Terry, it just straight up adds 2 new moves to his repertoire that can greatly expand his threat radius. For example, Buster Wolf gives him a massive burst movement option that can also be used for follow-ups after certain attacks. If he uses forward tilt. Usually with forward tilt, he can do crack shoot or burn knuckle afterwards to follow it up. But after a certain point, his range of being able to do that disappears since the target is knocked back too far away. But with Buster Wolf, he can travel a lot further. Buster Wolf also just being a very strong way to close out a stock that can close out stocks earlier than Power Dunk or Burn Knuckle. In the case of Power Geyser, it gives him a fantastic anti-air option that he didn't have before. Yes, you could say that his up tilt and up smash are anti-air options, but compared to the staggering range of Power Geyser, it's not even a contest. Power Geyser is also good for ledge trapping, right? You can use it to hit someone who's jumping out of ledge or even just hanging on ledge, and it can even be used as a shield break option. It gives Terry more options than he has before. Now I know what you're gonna say, with Tetra Card and Lucario Card and the counter for Joker, it allows him to do stuff that he couldn't do before. But Rebel's Guard is still technically a counter. It's not a very effective one, it just charges up the Rebel's gauge. Moreover, the properties of Iha into Igon are the same. Like, Igon does have the explosion radius, but realistically, what is that going to do on stage? Like, it doesn't really change the kind of purpose of what you want to do with the side B. Same with Gun. Both the regular gun and the powered up gun have a knockback effect, so it doesn't gain anything new. But Terry, on the other hand, gains access to more options and more scenarios and more coverage than he would ordinarily have access to. Now, regarding the argument of win more, because you can also interpret Terry's go button because it's infinite in terms of how long you can make it last, how many times you can use Buster Wolf and Power Geyser, that once you hit 100%, you can theoretically use it to accentuate your lead if you're up a stock, right? Because it doesn't matter if Terry's ahead or behind, you will always get go at 100%. Yes, that's true. Sometimes Terry's can use it to just snowball out of control and, kind of explode, but at the same time, fundamentally, it is designed to be a comeback mechanic, right? It's a high risk, high reward move where if you're at kill percent or at a range where one powerful move is going to take you out, then it puts more pressure on the player to make it count. Hence why I think Terry's go button is a little bit better than Joker's Arsene. Not saying that Joker's Arsene is a bad comeback mechanic, I just think it's a pretty middle of the pack kind of deal, which is why I put it in B tier and Terry in A tier. Up next is going to be, let's put Kazuya in A tier. Now, I put Kazuya in A tier mostly because, one, unlike Terry's go button, it's a one-time use. Rage Drive is a one-time use. However, you could argue that it's similar to Joker, where it doesn't give him something new that he can use. He already had, I think it's called, is it Heaven's Door? There's so many names for Kazuya's attacks. Or he already has the command grab using his down B even before he gets Rage Drive. But Rage Drive is probably one of the most comeback mechanic type abilities in the sense that it does exactly what you want it to. If you're taking a lot of damage, you get thrown above 100%, but then you can use that move to turn the tides around immediately. It's like a one use, like if you fail, a lot of people like to say that it's a more healthy version of Lil Mac's KO punch because he doesn't lose it immediately. However, he can't just recklessly spam it because the more he whiffs Rage Drive, the faster it goes away. Not to mention, he gets like a 10% bonus damage increase or something like that when he has Rage active. So it puts the question of, should I use Rage Drive to just do a whole bunch of damage immediately or kill my opponent versus using the increased damage to make my combos all the more devastating. I think that Kazuya's Rage Drive is definitely one of the more well thought out comeback mechanics in that it's not so overly game changing to the point where it kind of compensates for a player's lack of skill, but at the same time it's still a threat to the point where you want to get rid of it as the opponent. Like if you're fighting against a Kazuya and he activates Rage at 100%, you want to either kill him or push him above the threshold to where he loses Rage so that you don't have to worry about it, because Rage Drive is an instant kill for most characters at around maybe 80%. It's not that dangerous at lower percents, but at higher percents, yeah, you gotta start worrying about it. Okay, I suppose while we're talking about Kazuya's Rage Drive, let's talk about Little Mac's KO Punch. I consider it the worst comeback mechanic in the game. Now, functionally, it is the best in terms of giving you a comeback, right? Like it kills you at freaking like 20%. But due to the sheer devastation factor of KO Punch, Little Mac is balanced to be such a bad character. Like I feel if he didn't have KO Punch, it would be much easier to balance him out as a character, but because he has it, they have to make it so... It just turns into a really... How do I say? It's a polarizing comeback mechanic in that what ends up usually happening is that to a greater extent than Kazuya, Terry, and Joker, players just kind of play monkey in the middle if there's like, battlefield platforms or small battlefield platforms, or they just spend the entire time trying to just doink Little Mac or just like throw him into hit stun so he loses the KO punch. And then the Little Mac player is trying to do everything they can to avoid getting hit and to land the KO punch. It just turns the current match into a really edgy game state where neither player, it's like a game of chicken, like who gives in first? Does the Little Mac get impatient and just let it rip, or does the opponent get impatient and try to go for a hit to then hit Little Mac out of KO punch? I feel like it's just too polarizing of a comeback mechanic. A comeback mechanic should not be, oh, suddenly everything revolves around the comeback mechanic. It should have influence and sway over a match, but it shouldn't be the focal point of the match, right? It should just be like a separate thing. And I feel like Little Mac does the exact opposite, where it's too valuable or too impactful of a move that players drop everything they were doing before and focus purely on that, which is not fun. Not many people enjoy dealing with Little Mac because of the KO punch being such a, oh my god, what do I do, for both players, which is why I put it in D tier. Moving on, Wario. His will be in B tier. Wario is to some extent a rage drive. The only difference is that it has a much longer charge time than Rage Drive, in that Wario can only feasibly get one full powered waft off and maybe a half waft per game. Now granted, even the half waft is extremely devastating, but to compensate, Wario doesn't have to be at a certain percent threshold. It just over time accumulates more gas, for lack of a better term, and then he can just let it rip. Now, I like that Wario's waft can be used as a combo, right? It's not like Kazuya where it's more of a Hail Mary. When in the case of Wario, in order to guarantee it, he has to follow up into like a, an up tilt or a falling up air or just some other setup that allows him to just make it more consistent. And it's a very core part of his kit, but I also don't like how it encourages the Wario player to effectively camp. There's a whole bunch of controversy around if camping is an ethical strategy or if it's like a sportsman-like strategy, and some people argue it's perfectly viable because you play to win and you'll do whatever it takes to win. You're not technically abusing anything. You're not abusing an exploit or some kind of glitch like wobble or a peach bomb stalling, so it's fair game. I'm kind of in the middle, where sometimes you just have to play a very evasive defensive playstyle. Sometimes confrontation is not recommended. In the case of Wario, his entire kit is about confrontation. He's a very melee-centric nature, but then you have Waft, which kind of makes it so that after he develops a lead, he could just run and generate Waft and then kind of come back in. So it's like, not to the same egregious extent as Sonic, but Wario's Waft, it's not a comeback mechanic because you don't need to be behind to get it. At the same time, it has the comeback factor to it, which has proven to be quite clutch in a lot of situations, as evident by the times Gluto pulled off, an insane YOLO waft, especially I think one time it was against Tilde at LMBM 2023. That was pretty insane, right? Like, that was a very, very ballsy call out on his part, and I respect that. So I'll just put it in B tier because I can't think of a better argument to put it higher or lower. Alright, moving on. Let's put Lucario in C tier. Kind of similar to Little Mac, where Lucario's aura is too much of a focus. I believe actually in Makrock's video, Armadillo specifically mentioned how he wished aura wasn't so influential in Lucario's kit. He wishes it would be consistent, because what happens is if you're ahead, then Lucario generates aura slower, and if you're behind, he generates it faster. Armadillo would rather Lucario's aura just be a consistent factor regardless of percent or stock deficit or whatever. So Lucario's kind of in the middle between Joker and Little Mac, where the aura doesn't increase what he can do, it just makes what he does more potent. And then in terms of Little Mac, it makes it so that too much of the focus is on Lucario at, like, let's say 150%. You're kind of doing everything you can to just avoid getting hit while still trying to get a strong hit yourself to close out the stock. And then at times Lucario kind of just throws out a Hail Mary forward smash, like, run back forward smash, or just some really powerful move, and then you die like 20. It's a really polarizing game state that I think is partly the reason why people dislike fighting Lucario, and also why I think a lot of Lucario players, or the few people who do play Lucario, find him pretty frustrating and then eventually drop him for someone else, because the fact that you're a trash tier character until you're at a point where you're gonna die is kind of not good game design. Like, I get the premise of Lucario, they wanted him to be a very high risk, high reward character who gets stronger the more damage he takes, but then the other attributes they allotted to him are not conducive to that win condition, which is why I put it in C tier, because it's a good concept to just terrible execution. I think a better example of Lucario's aura would be Sephiroth. So Sephiroth doesn't get anything new, right? Like, his attacks just do 30% more damage across the board. And yes, he gets super armor on his smash attacks, but it's, it's his smash attacks, like it doesn't really matter. However, he gets a wing. The wing opens up a lot of different things because it makes his already good aerial pressure even better, and then more onto that, it gives him more offstage pressure, which allows him to get more edge guards off. It allows him to do more mix-up options when landing, or like when chasing people in the air, juggling. Like, it is kind of similar to Joker, where some people interpret it as a win more mechanic, but because of the fact that Sephiroth can't sustain wing for an indefinite period of time, especially when he's ahead. However, he gets the wing more early on and gets to keep it for longer the further behind he is. That is what I think puts it just a bit higher than Joker's Arsene. Plus, again, the extra jump adds just a whole new layer of interactions and options for Sephiroth. So it's kind of like Terry, where he gets more options, not necessarily in the form of more moves, but an extra jump just opens up a lot more possibilities for him, on top of the fact that he does more damage with his attacks. And now we arrive at the main. Full disclosure, I'm not biased. I actually genuinely think that it is where I'm going to put it at. In fact, I'll put it in S tier. I think Cloud's comeback mechanic is the healthiest comeback mechanic in the game. It bears a little bit of every character if you think about it, right? Like all the other comeback mechanics below him. In contrast to Joker, who, aside from getting Rebel Wings or whatever his up he is, the one where he just like glides up instead of grappling hooks, Cloud actually does get more functionality on all of his moves. Limit Blade Beam compared to Blade Beam is a lot different from Iha and Aigon. The Limit Blade Beam, not only does it freaking kill, it travels further, it's transcendent, and it even creates an explosion that can sometimes lead to really vastly different interactions than what you could on regular Blade Beam. Cross Slash and Limit Cross Slash, same thing. Regular Cross Slash, you can use it like 1-2, and then if you miss 1-2, you can't do the third one. Cross Slash can be used to kind of just float in the air for a little bit, but Limit Cross Slash automatically chains all 5 attacks together. On top of that, he also gets intangibility whenever he uses a limit move. Limit Climb Hazard, same thing. So kind of like Joker and Terry, where Cloud doesn't necessarily get new moves, but he also kind of does get new moves because the functionality of his limit moves are so much different from his base form. And then, kind of like Kazuya, Cloud gets a new killer move, so to speak, like Kazuya and Little Mac, where he gets Finishing Touch. It's kind of, I would say, I don't know, how do I want to put this? It's between Wario and Kazuya in terms of Cloud needs setup to get it to work, but if he does get it to work, it has arguably better kill power than Kazuya's Rage Drive. However, it's riskier to throw it out, and you can only use it once, so it's more like Wario, whereas Kazuya, he can throw it out a couple times. Moreover, unlike the other comeback mechanics, Cloud can actually charge up his limit whenever he wants. Now, because of that, you might not think that it's a comeback mechanic, but I think that's also compensated by the fact that he can only use it once. In addition, he loses the physics boost from having limit whenever he does use that move. So that comes back to, I believe, who is it? Oh yeah, Kazuya, where do you want to keep the limit to make use of the mobility enhancement, or do you want to use the killer move to just end your opponent's stock? Much like how Kazuya is, do you want to keep the rage in order to make more use of the damage enhancement, or do you just want to use rage drive and get their stock over with? I think it's a really well-balanced comeback mechanic slash win more mechanic. It's kind of a mixture of both, but I think that really accentuates Cloud's gameplay. It's not overly egregious to the point where, like Lucario and Little Mac, that becomes a focus. However, you still have to account for it. It's still something that you have to be aware of and play around, which is why I put it in S tier. Anyways, that's gonna be it for, I think that's every character with a comeback mechanic. You could say Incineroar's Revenge is a comeback mechanic, but in my Why No One Plays Incineroar video, I talked about how it really isn't. It's more of just a counter that can be used into something else, because by that logic, Bayonetta's Witch Time is a comeback mechanic too. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below if you agree or disagree with my points. And again, apologies if I rambled in this video. This is mostly why I script all my videos, but I've had a few people tell me that they actually prefer more freeform commentary, so I'll try to do this every so often, but for the time being, that's gonna be it for today. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate it. And make sure to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other Smash discussion videos if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.